I've made 5 points to try and answer the exam questions that our chairman set us over to you, and I'm hoping that you'll be happy with the answers as a set of answers to the exam questions. And I'm going to talk as President of LIBER rather than Director of the Library Service in my own institution. First question was, what was the biggest impact that the day made on you? Me, that is. So I think looking back over the day, I would say that I was, and really pick up a point that Bob has just made, I was surprised by the evidence that putting papers in, I'm pleasantly surprised, but I was surprised that putting papers in repositories actually leads to more downloads from the publisher's site. That wasn't an outcome that I was expecting. So in a sense, you could say, and one might say, that repositories are actually doing the marketing for commercial journals. However, I'm a historian by training. Actually, I'm a medievalist, and when I'm not being a librarian, I write articles about medieval history. And I have to say that if you took a time frame of 2 years in medieval history and built some results on that, your PhD examiner would tell you that to go away and think again. The time, as a historian, the time frame that Pierre is time limited, of course, but the time frame in which Pierre has been able to operate has given us a snapshot, in my view as a historian, rather than a considered outcome of what the impact of open access repositories is. So Bob's second point is perfectly valid. That this is the snapshot now. What will it look like in the long run? We don't know. If we want to know, then that's an argument for continuing funding for the next phase of PIA. That's my first point. PIA tells us something, second point, PIA tells us something about green open access, but it doesn't tell the whole story. It talks about the relationships between deposited content in repositories and published equivalents. And those are the terms of reference of the PIA project. For libraries in membership of LIBER and their universities, there are other motivations for being involved in green open access. Many of us use our repositories as a marketing tool to market to potential students, because with the changes in higher education in my own country, in the UK, marketing, getting the best students, particularly international students, high fee paying students from non-EU countries who pay full fees, that's quite important. And so some of the most popular content in our repositories is actually research literature, research PhD theses, which will be used to attract other postgraduate students to come and study in the UK. And if you look at the download figures, those are some of the most popular forms of content. So universities have a number of motivations for running open access repositories, green open access repositories, and Pierre covers some of the issues, but it doesn't cover all of them, because it wasn't designed to cover all of them. So it picks up Ian's point earlier in the day that a discussion about Pierre and a discussion about green open access are two different discussions. They're linked, but they're not the same discussion. Okay, 3 final points. There were a number of contradictory findings that we heard today, and I think if, as a serious researcher, I'd be interested in seeing more research to explain why we have contradictory findings. Some of the findings suggest that the share of the market for green open access will decline. That was one of the findings from the studies in PIA. But then we were told, and it's true, that the number of green open access repositories is actually growing. So if their market share is declining, why is the number growing? What are the motivations, the drivers in each of these areas? Those are contradictory tensions. So we would need to look at that. A second set of contradictory findings I can't explain. We saw one fascinating table which looked at the source of open access calls, and most of the countries listed were developing countries, and you can understand why the list might be developing countries. We have similar tables in my own institution, looking at UCL Discovery, our open access repository, but I can't link the countries in the download stats in my institution to the ones in here, because there's North America, there's China, there are many Western European countries in the UCL table that weren't present in the peer table. So I don't know what's going on. I'm sure there's a reason, I can't think what it is. And if we're interested in research, that would need to be put right in more research. Last and final points. From today, what will libraries do as a result of the peer findings and the judgments that have been outlined today? What is the most likely thing that research libraries will do? Well, it's important to ask research libraries that question, because if you look in European universities at where repositories are based, they tend to be based in libraries. And it's the library that runs the repository on the whole, on behalf of the institution. I think they'll do two things. As Professor Crew said, I think they'll carry on with green deposit as they do at the minute. I don't see anything that I've heard today which makes me think that university libraries will stop advocating green deposit. But I take the view that they will also be well advised to look at the gold route and to collaborate with bodies like LIBER and LERU, the League of European Research Universities, who are developing some companion projects on gold open access publishing to complement the green deposit in repositories that most European research universities already have. So, my final point is that the Chair asked, is it worth funding peer for more research? I'll say yes, it is. I think there should be another round, but I would change the series of questions. I'd scale it up, not just to look at publisher-repository relations, but to look more widely at the impact of green open access dissemination on scholarly dissemination, compare, contrast that with gold, and then look at the impacts of data. Now that's a big project, but I think those are the questions I'm suggesting future research should look at, building on the really successful findings that we've heard about today, and for which, on behalf of European research libraries, I congratulate the project authors.